Hello, Barbaderos. Y Barbaderosis. I donated that, by the way, to the languages. And Baderos is a swear, Eh, but it but it's instead of being a disgusting thing, we just have it now a swear because we're going to need things to say emphatic. The same way a breaching method knew that we would. A breaching method that came from before modern religious messengers were born and never left. Therefore, it was entrenched before America's founders were born. And as we know, slavery was entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. More than 13 were entrenched before America's founders were born. And roles with that had been sustained. Not one has changed. Our founders declassified this. But rather than value what our founders communicated to us, having had to have the rest of their communications and their actual communications declassified for us, because there was even roles with slavery entrenched. We know it was already sustained against Native Americans, but you guys have dishonesty there and you force it. So you guys came through breached campuses using isms. Still, you guys speak about white supremacy. You haven't brought up black people's whites of eyes. In the breaching method, reassign that. You have our founders framed. No one had free speech. They declassified it. Nature itself shows us it. Showed little kids it. They try to speak it. They're sensed. The interbranch and the counters to them. At countries A through Z, they can't afford to have discerned what witch trials are about. How to think about that properly. We know the slavery laws were entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies too, through a whole bunch of through different countries, different companies, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. And then America's founders were born. Founders, plural, behind James Madison and his plan, and they referred to themselves, plural. They directed us to understand themselves, plural, as him, singular, and his plan. And then they went with that leverage and means by that plan to George Washington, and they counter-extorted him. And he agreed there was no other way but to counter-extort the other founders too, force them. And that's what they did at key locations. No one had free speech. Even once James Madison was the president, he still didn't have free speech. And he was the fourth president. They still didn't have free speech. You guys aren't even allowing people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, our first president, let alone of our founders. The founders had to extort the presidents A through Z, counter-extort the presidents A through Z, and the rest of the colonists and the rest of the Native Americans. And I say the rest of them because there are proofs. Nature itself shows us. No way James Madison and the founders, plural, as the colonists, were strong enough without the Native Americans. And see President, see Chief. And see like how one of the only things that they took to care to teach us well, unabridged, is to remember that someone said, don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. Don't forget too, all those databases were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, collusion/S. As too, on top of that, as a criminal re-engineering, tactically criminally re-engineering, a tactical criminal re-engineering of the republic for which we stand, of its campuses system, and of the pantheism, to see through its own ism too, to be and stay being led by. How it is functional, how there is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible identity of value/value progression. For example, we don't leave out the slightest finite detail, let alone the finite details, the group active ones, active as criminal insidious nature, relative to how the black people's whites of eyes, what nature communicates with it, is left out and replaced pretended theory, when we have the sciences using theory, obfuscating, and worse, the identity of relativity / hyperrelativity, using self-value, using math to sense collusions not self-valued. You guys can't afford to have discerned why there's a witch trial place right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, still, they're communicating other for why and how George Washington was using James Madison's plan, and he had to come there into Hartford, Connecticut, too, to counter-extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. In other words, to enable means to win that. But it wasn't just against England. There were internationally monitored conversations and roles with the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, terrorists originally and still, and way worse. Because in countries A through Z, it has them since semi-ancient times, since right through their, like, look how we can discern right through America's founding, there was a breaching method entrenched. But the breaching method found out that our founders had stuff declassified for themselves after they were dead, demonstrably. And nature itself is still demonstrating it. But more and more they're replacing it. And that's recorded, but you guys aren't following mandated law. You pretend the suburbs were designed tactically to nature to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while being a landscape theater for that torture, extortion, factory nature, slavery method to keep self-value roles more and more. The only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures is to self-value roles, needs, nature, styles of logic and reason and syntax, therefore function in nature as criminal and citizen's nature, criminally foreign influence, like with subject treatments, with name treatments, with sequence, with questions and answers. The breaching method measured and maintained people roles with that against themselves and everyone else, and self-value roles with it to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, including if that body was a majority of people. The self-value part is part of how it senses. No one self-values it except for, in other words, they do. If they understood, they wouldn't self-value. But like the experts on the names of the people of the sciences, the names of the people of the the people of American history, they self-value. They have roles self-valuing with those departments at the campuses. Again, criminally re-engineered, taking them tactically apart from their function by the republic for which we stand and its campus system, and the exceptions that it also worked with and appreciated before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced / hypercriminally foreign influenced. 3 ways. And self-value roles with that. Otherwise, that body is sensed, and it's easily adapted to, including if it's a majority of people, including if it's everyone of a whole country. Any grouping of countries that tries to counter the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, everything it does, it already did it through ourselves, even though it is a part of ourselves. But it's not a named country. It's a method of keeping countries valuing, having been to other things, others ourselves, blamed for what it caused. It has styles, natures of logic. They can't defend that. And simultaneously afford syntax to be proper with convictions, with short words, let alone the protraction for what is proper by the sciences. That's why everyone, in other words, there are campuses A through Z at each age and nature of campus. Sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly, they have collusion / S, like with New York campuses. And next to each campus, are increasingly roles with the intelligence community, stacking predicate acts with facts, methods that are bound by the hyperforeign. It's not just at our countries, it's countries A through Z. Now as systems tactical from what has us shown the species, individual species body of individual bodies with all group differences generated by that which is generating other species bodies too. At the same time, there are also individual bodies of a species body with all group differences too, generated by the same thing. That is not us, it's not them, but it's all things anyway. Humanity prey, but now because they're of a breaching method too, that which we could name a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, that which would bring order to the minds of people to understand and to their syntax and to their nature. See, people don't know how to fight. We know that people are lying to us, including leaders, but everyone's missing how the locations, areas, and states are forcing the leaders to self-value roles, lying and pretending other. Otherwise, they hurt them. And when President Trump tries to tell the truth, people want to call people liars and things like that, and then make something that appears to be debatable. They're not addressing sequence shifts. The news locations have wire crime acts and methods. Forgiveness is because, in other words, all kinds of private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, the three branches of government, the intelligence tied to them, the state offices of the judicial branch offices of Connecticut, the state corrections offices, and names next to them, adjunctive to it through time, and like conjunctions like the Route 3 that goes by the state judicial branch offices. It's increasingly collusion /S with the names there, only capable of self-valuing roles with all kinds of natures of organized crime, acts, and methods. And not for how they're known that they have roles with the intelligence and interbranch, like unmarked police forms and other elements of that. But see, they have it also in ways that A through Z. They use it where they're not supposed to use the right to lie. In other words, and they're not supposed to leak things, they leak things. Also non-verbally. So if you respond to it, would they communicate non-verbally? Then it makes you say, they pretend that look, he said that, and it makes it look like we spoke with someone. Like there's an older Mendez brother. Another one I barely know. He tried to make a big exception of knowing me. I knew that years before. I recorded that. They're increasingly one of the ones with the state judicial branch offices. Also with digital crimes with FBI and Weathersfield Police, with Facebook too. Facebook is personally and professionally involved with people with the World Trade Center, criminally foreign influence before the World Trade Center attack. The court next to it, criminally foreign influence before the World Trade Center attack. Forgiveness is because those criminal foreign influences came through the campuses A through Z. You guys haven't, in other words, you guys have been showing fake transcripts to leaders of America. The first Trump administration and before the Obama administration, Connecticut intercampuses with names involved interstates with campuses, a Bryant University, and a Johnson and Wales, a Jonathan Maiano recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. That was one time I ever saw them. Miami with, in other words, a Paul Zano. I never had a conversation with him. He tried to make it look like he knew me, but there were proofs that they took pictures of me near him. They tried to make a fake exception at colleges a few times. We had no communication. It was only just to make a fake exception, pretend he knew me, as people from other areas involved on my street with retired police chiefs and medical and sexual offenders of kids, putting fake transcripts in databases. They have Trinity College is involved with a whole bunch of people from other areas that have been planting evidence on my street, like with a Paul Zano. People all along Route 3. He confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed. People with the name Puzo, I don't even know them. Mike Levine, too, is further involved with proven child abusers, leaders, of kids involved with them. Years apart, First Force, they have roles with the First Force part and exploitations of that. Mass evidence is wrecked. A whole bunch of people in the Brit Superior Court involved, in Harper Courts, in the Connecticut District Court, again with the state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices, involved personally and professionally with the same house/S. And these are some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, intercultural and intracultural, Irish theme. It's their own against their own. All kinds of psychiatry corruption, right through world wars. Tactically delusions raw too. And with their takes on American history, their collusions with it. All kinds of natures of organized crimes with databases, collusion/S. And then further, where those databases are the campuses, and all exceptions like homeschool. This has each age and nature of logic and reason. Self-valuing roles with principles defended tactical terror from what could defend itself and afford to have the principles defended, like with black people's right survive, and what our founders communicated through declassified to us about how and why no one had free speech, about why and how everyone had to hide their actual motivations and make other fake motivations for why and how they took part with the Declaration of Independence, and for why and how. That's what, for example, it's not just about a tea tax when there's slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. That means there's torture, extortion, slavery of everyone. The colonists wanted to build better and safer suburbs then. Tactically denatured grounds identity relationship to itself, let alone for regular citizens, let alone for Native Americans. In other words, see, the lawyers are involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes too, with the interbranch at all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch names and intelligence tied to them, putting the same sequence ships with foreign bodies too. Then they need to hide that in the future. That's why they pretend, this is the outcome. That's what they decided. Obviously, they know they make mistakes. And they're not, they can call someone, there's a scam. Everything is a scam with these people. They have people with the prisons involved with years apart, child abusers, leaders of kids, First Force, more than and now involved. And part of the reason they're involved is because they're being coached in their self-value roles. With the and self-value is sensing for the breaching method. That's why I'm saying self-value, not as an insult. In other words, you guys have self-value roles replacing what our founders declassified. The experts on the names of the experts on American history. So how could they appreciate Marbury versus Madison? All the presidents were counter-extorted. All the people are still tortured, fact, human nature extorted, and fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically. It's a sick punk game all that time to pretend not to be able to discern, calling it, in other words, the people in the background of rap videos in New York City, for example, that we can't even see because they're behind these huge buildings. They have to walk down there, go to the grade, putting big things in database. Their delusions are out too, the medical involved with the news and the interbranch. Their families personally and professionally putting fake transcripts together while tactically delusions raw. Then pretending passions and emotions. Kind of punk games they're playing from distance. They've been using all natures of investigators. The way the breaching method showed them they have to. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Collusion/S. All sides of criminal and civil cases. I called before I even knew there was going to be a trial against Puff Daddy. I marked it on the internet. Even too, before people from Russia and Ukraine were killing each other, and before Israel and Palestine were killing each other, especially Israel. They have all that technology, and everyone's pretending they don't understand. Everyone's still with the isms. Sick. In other words. And what do they call it? White supremacy. You leave out the breaching method. You're keeping the breaching method. You're keeping collusions framing our founders, who are distinct from our presidents, except for as James Madison. But he still didn't have free speech. That's why they had to leave slavery entrenched. And they had to lie about their histories. They had to put fake things in databases about themselves and others. And everyone was still, and is still monitored by internationally monitored conversations. Then they have audacity to use words like negotiations, like it's positive. It can only be positive. Peace is criminal insidiousness. We have campuses A through Z are criminally born and will tactically delusions raw. Forgiveness is to blame the premises treatments themselves. You guys can't do that. And you guys are using other people's reporting. See, the news locations have wire and mail crime and digital crime methods with the FBI and with multiple police departments from Connecticut, with people also involved with corruption at Washington, D.C., and with the World Trade Center, where and how it is manifest at campuses, and with people in collusions from the old town, Old Wethersfield, founding locations and conjunctions to it, like Main Street into Route 175, right through Wethersfield, through Newington, and into New Britain, where it stops at Central Connecticut State University, on all sides of it, are people with corners all along that Route 175. Who, like, for example, there are people that acted near a house reportedly tied to a mother and daughter who are both principals of Wethersfield with the last name O'Connor. And a Tom O'Connor was reportedly lived there. And his neighbors, like across the street, across Route 175. I think, but in other words, involved with I believe that's 175. I don't know. But in other words, those people, the same ones around 175 at that corner there, near Tom O'Connor's house. I never had a personal conversation with him. Increasingly, people involved with the World Trade Center attack have roles at Wethersfield campuses, intercities and interstates with other campuses, like with UConn too, and medical and fire campuses. And fire campuses are running in as patients to hide life progressions with doctors involved with them personally and professionally, and with other overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And they're faking and changing what's recorded 24/7. At campuses filmed 24/7, they're putting fake transcripts and replacing what's recorded where no one's watching. And this is also how they are leaking. Former FBI Director Robert Luskin and Connecticut military also has roles with Hartford Hospital, with the World Trade Center attack. Remote uses of America's identity effectively, completely, and of Saudi Arabia's. It's the same reason the people that are defending the religious books are collusions with the people attacking them, forcing them value out of sequence, even though right up front, the Old Testament, for example, has a part that says only defend right here. It doesn't say sometimes or defend the other part. It says only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. And there's a reason it says this. But no one even knows about this part. I never hear anyone speak about this part, even though it says only defend this part. Until we're in out. In other words, you guys have nature. Our founders communicated for us to blame. In other words, anyone who tries to pretend that honest science spoke about what was causing people even like violence in New York City. It's because the sciences are criminally foreign influence. The difference of their guilt, however, or of the three branches of government, or of the intelligence tied to them, or of the overt criminal enterprises juxtaposed not by accident, or of the terrorists. See everyone using the word extremism now? Everyone pretending that we wanted rules with torture, and with them fabricating news. Uses of right to lie, we don't have the right to lie, like a James Comey. Involved us also with the Diddy trial. No, but they're only letting people that are fake punks directed to be. They're proofs that the whole thing's fake because they have all sides of the case. And former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and James Comey involved too with the prosecutors and judges and the campuses involved. See him speaking about all those drugs and things about them. And all those times they put all the kids in jail on the cities. Where are they going to go? They're going to keep putting them in jail. How come no one ever brings up the doctors involved? Those kids aren't building drug things in those big tenement buildings. You guys are out of your minds. Speaking about white supremacy, leaving out and replacing our founders' communications, using their words, self-value uses of their words to measure and maintain self-value roles. Otherwise, you guys are sensing for the breaching method. Because these little kids could have told you our founders did not have free speech. All exception nature were used against them. Two, truths used for lies against themselves. There's a nature of fact-giving nature. This is why the presidents get angry. And also it's why they say and they ignore the things. Because locations, areas, and states in every country, they're forcing to be entertained. Nature's a practical reason. For example, I use Immanuel Kant's phrase that are through and as systems tactical ulterior. From how and why we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. We have nature itself projecting to us communications about difference. We are a different species body from other species bodies. But all the species bodies are individual species bodies of individual bodies. And again, all group differences are being generated by itself. So the proverbial adult has never been in the room regarding black and white syntax and what our founders communicated. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. That's what I found. That's why I learned that from an accomplished pro se litigant. That's what it means. Marbury versus Madison. It means real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. And they didn't have the free speech to defend that until we complete it for them. And I mean, in other words, you guys have self-valid rules using their words, leaving out what they communicated about that. So each identity of difference is have been used. The branch of the government, the overt criminal enterprise. In other words, see them involved using this as a RICO case. Therefore, it's as involved with criminal enterprises. RICO evolved from the Organized Crime Control Act. See, but all these things that are manifest with the Republic is still abridged. So they're not allowing it to be discerned correctly. We don't even have to be lawyers. Please get me off the fake conversations at Channel 3 News. Connecticut's Channel 3 News fake conversations with me, with themselves, and with others. They have roles forcing a child abuser leader of kids at that time. And some of the things they faked was conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack. And I was in the World Trade Center attack right next to it, in the court next to it, right before the attack. I wasn't there when the attack happened, but right before it, I was. And the court itself was proven to have roles with a sequence shift from inside the court and names on all sides of that case, of a case in the court that day, the court next to the World Trade Center towers. They also have collusions forced, just faked for themselves by people with the World Trade Center and the news, interstates, as ones involved internationally. And Weathersfield police are increasingly involved with people involved with Saudi Arabia, demonstrably since before I was born, with Central Connecticut State University, with Trinity College, with UConn. All these countries are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, individually grouped and together, and syntax that can't defend that, and their roles in nature with that, and afford to be proper free speech and mandated law. So they have collusions with mandated laws to keep people's mouths shut. So they have rules with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the Connecticut corrections officers, with a bunch of people from other areas involved with organized crimes on my street, and with the people further involved with the police that attached me to fake conversations and being there as a kid, now as an adult. And the kids who did go down there as adults, increasingly involved with organized crimes on my street, prying to fake ties, fake natures ties to me. Chris Walter sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He was influenced to invite me to his wedding, to make it look fake ties, fake natures ties to me, to cover up what he was forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to do since he was a kid. In other words, with my neighbors, increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart. And more people involved with Officer Jerry Miller, with digital crimes, with the Facebook pages of the campuses, and people with Hartford Hospital and next to it are increasingly involved with the intelligence community, with Chris Walters, and people with the name Walters. Pearl Michael Emmett, too, is one of the ones further involved with some digital and sexual and medical offenders of kids. And a principal upskirt nature I recorded involved with way worse, and untimely deaths and roles with other natures of organized crimes at the same time, and murders. And they brought body only spots too at the same time. And the news, fake ties, fake natures ties to me at the same time, with the principal child abuser when I caught that being forced, and with people that were involved with that years ago, and with people involved next to the news locations, and with the FBI next to WTNH. In other words, they're playing a rat trap game. They need to keep other things, others themselves, blamed for whether and how there are fake scientists pretending other at New York campuses. They need little tools like pretend white supremacy, while they pretend they don't realize the Native Americans, white, and our founders, white and black too, Native Americans, and our founders, and exceptions. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes. At the same time, we have exceptions. You guys are preventing all the revelations here from being communicated by pretending, by changing and faking what people say, by using nature to force the communications not to evolve, not to be represented properly. They're just changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded too. The FBI and multiple police departments have digital crime methods. There's an officer poisoning involved with that, also with actual poisons, and people involved with the murders and things intercities, and confessions used relative to how the breaching method used confessions before the church did. It forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded countries A through Z to blame other things, others, ourselves, for things that it caused, that they didn't know how to stop. So they tried to do it the best they could, and they blamed other things, others, ourselves. And it measured and maintained, made them think that they did that correctly. And it made the people counter that correctly, but incorrectly blaming the people for which started it too, instead of the breaching method too. And more, everyone's blaming other things, others, ourselves. And more, it's an increasing answer being demonstrated to us by nature itself. A human fact-achieving nature breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded countries A through Z to blame other things, others, or ourselves for why and how A through Z were all of a sudden not valuing how we can discern the body of the hyper invisible but still discernible, the hyper simultaneous to an extent. And wherever we can discern it to an extent, like for example, where how it's that one identity of value progression that is not our species body, is not the other species bodies, but it is all things anyway. It is that generating all group differences. And as value here, we could ignore that, but then our value as our special difference is forced away from here as Earth's special difference. The identity of all space/existence has been communicating to us about a special difference. In other words, but it doesn't communicate with words, except for where and how we know it does, through our own hyper additional to itself, because it makes more and more of itself. In other words, but it's functional how it is hyper invisible but still discernible. That's also why and how we need to appreciate more than one name for God. For the science of following the hyper invisible but still discernible, not leaving out the smallest finite detail, but also not forcing someone to entertain someone's faith, especially criminally point influence, tactical illusions, wrought faiths, as formerly conceived. All stand deceived. Boxing. Think about that. You guys had obligations to make clearer than day how James Madison and our founders behind him and his plan want nothing to do with slavery, want nothing to do with torture, want nothing to do with extortion. And they want us to understand clearer than day why and how they had to leave that breaching method entrenched. They wanted us to understand clearer than day how that breaching method operated, how it was entrenched. Black pupils, peer, who disbelieves.